The first snow of the year came down the day she rode into my valley to take it from me. I saw her before she saw me. I was on the gatewalk above the Emberfell road, watching the sky go gray and heavy the way it does the week the cold sets its teeth, and there she was at the bend below the birches. A single rider, hooded, upright as a spear, on a good horse that had been ridden hard and cared for badly. She did not look up at the walls the way travelers do. She looked at the granary. She looked at the mill. She looked at the smoke over the roofs and counted the chimneys. And I knew before she reached the gate that she had come to reckon what we had and how much of it she could carry away. My steward Bran came up beside me, wiping flour from his hands. "One rider," he said, "Sarn colors on the saddle cloth." I had been waiting 3 years for a rider in Sarn colors. My father, before the cold took him, had borrowed against a famine winter to keep this valley fed, and the house of Sarn had lent the grain the way a fox lends a hen its company. The debt had grown in the dark, doubling on itself, and I had known for a long time that one day someone would come down that road to collect it. I had thought in my imaginings that it would be a man with soldiers, not a woman alone, snow already whitening her shoulders, riding as if the cold were a thing she had decided not to feel. "Open the gate," I said. Bran looked at me. "My lord, the rich she carries could put half the valley off its own land." "I know what she carries," I said. "Open the gate, it's snowing on her." She came through into the yard and drew rein, and when she pushed back her hood I saw a face made to give nothing away. Pale, fine-boned, eyes the flat gray of the sky she'd ridden under, a mouth that had learned young not to soften. Young, younger than I'd braced for. And cold. Cold the way the first ice on the water trough is cold, a thin hard skin over something that had not always been frozen. She looked at me and did not know me for the Lord. Why would she? I was in a plain fur and there was flour on my sleeve too, because it was festival week and every hand in Emberfell was in the kitchens, mine included. "I'm here to see the Lord of Emberfell," she said. Her voice was low and even, a voice that read numbers aloud for a living. "On the business of the house of Sarn. Tell him Neve of the ledger has come, and that it will go easier for him if he receives me tonight." "It's going to go easier for you if you get down off that horse and come inside," I said. "You've a debt to collect, and I've no doubt you'll collect every coin of it. But not tonight, and not in the snow, and not on an empty stomach. The pass behind you is closing as we speak. You'll not ride back through it before spring thaw whatever you decide, so you may as well be warm." Something moved behind her eyes then, not softness, not yet. Suspicion. As if kindness were a language she'd been cheated in before and had learned to check the coins. "You speak very freely for a steward," she said. "I'm a very free steward." I put up a hand for her reins. "Warwick," I said, "I'm the lord you've come to ruin. Come in out of the cold, Neve of the ledger. Emberfell doesn't leave anyone standing in the snow, not even the wolf sent to eat it." I watched her decide I was mocking her. I watched her decide, a breath later, that I wasn't. She got down. She was stiff from a long ride and she hit it, and when her boots hit the frozen yard, I saw her weight go wrong on one ankle and catch, and I did not offer my arm because I already understood she would rather fall than take it. "You'll regret the welcome," she said, low, only for me. "When you've read what I carry, you'll wish you'd left me in the snow." "Perhaps," I said, "but then I'd have to live all winter knowing I did it. That's a longer cold than yours." I took the reins from her hand. My fingers brushed hers. She was frozen through. The fool. She'd ridden hours past the point a sensible person stops, and in that half-second, with her half-frozen hand under mine and the first true snow coming down between us, the whole yard went quiet. Not truly quiet. The kitchen still clattered. A child still shrieked laughing somewhere. The wind still moved in the birches. But under all of it there was a hush, the particular expectant hush that falls on this valley in the last hour before heavy snow, when the world seems to hold its breath and wait for the white to come. I had felt that hush 100 times over the land. I had never once felt it stand up inside my own chest. I let go of her hand. I told myself it was the cold. Behind us, up on the pass, the snow was already laying itself down thick across the road she'd meant to leave by. She didn't know it yet. I did. And God forgive me, standing there with the hush ringing under my ribs, I was glad. She meant to be gone by dawn. I knew it the way you know weather. She ate little at the long table that night. She sat at the far end with her ledger satchel between her feet like a dog she didn't trust the room around, and she watched the valley folk come and go with the flat attention of someone taking inventory. She counted us. I could see her doing it. So many hands, so many mouths, so much grain in the loft, so many head of stock in the byre. She was pricing in Burfell the way a butcher prices a beast, and every warm thing that passed in front of her she turned over and looked for the profit in. At dawn she was in the yard with her horse, saddled before the cocks had finished. "The pass is shut," I told her. I'd known she'd try. I'd risen early to be there when she found out. "Then I'll take the low road." "The low road floods at the first thaw and freezes between," I said. "There's no leaving in Burfell in winter, Neve. There never has been. The valley keeps what the snow brings it until spring. That's not a threat, it's just the geography." I nodded at the white wall of the pass. "You may serve your writ, do your reckoning, put my whole valley in your ledger down to the last spoon, but you'll do it from a chair by my fire because there is no other chair to be had between here and the thaw." She stood very still, and I saw her recalculate. I saw her fold the fact of the shut pass into her plans the way she folded everything, coldly, without complaint, a new sum to be solved. "Fine," she said, "then let's begin the writ." That was when the bell went. Not the festival bell. The other one, the fast, urgent clatter that means someone's hurt, and every head in the yard came up. And old Marta was running from the mill cottages with her apron flapping, crying that the Hallow child had the choking fever, that he'd been bad in the night and worse by morning, and now he'd gone blue at the lips and no breath would come. I ran. Half the valley ran with me, and I did not think about the woman in the yard at all until I was inside the cottage, in the reek of fever and fear, with the child gray on the pallet and his mother screaming and no healer nearer than the shut pass. And a cold, clear voice behind me said, "Move. Let me see him." She had followed. Of course she had followed. She would tell me later she came because a dead child is bad for the reckoning, one less body to tax, but that was a lie she needed and I let her have it. She knelt. She put her cold factor's hands on the boy's throat and his chest, and she tipped his head just so, and she called for steam and a bowl and the bitterbark that grew. She'd noted riding in, along our fence line. She'd catalogued even our weeds, and she worked over that child with a swift, certain gentleness that had nothing to do with ledgers at all. Where had she learned it? I didn't ask. I watched her hands, and I understood I was seeing the thing she kept locked under the ice. Somewhere behind the debt factor, there had been a girl who healed sick children, and life had frozen her over, and the ice had not gone all the way down. The boy breathed. It took an hour, and it was ugly, and then all at once his chest hitched and dragged in air and he wailed, and the whole cottage broke into weeping, and Marta seized Neve's frozen hands and kissed them and wouldn't stop, and Neve of the ledger sat back on her heels with a look on her face I can only call stricken, as though she'd been caught doing something shameful. "He'll want warmth and the bark tea 3 days," she said, standing, wiping her hands, rebuilding her face. "That's all, it's nothing." "It's a child's whole life," I said. "That's not nothing, that's everything there is." She wouldn't look at me. She went out into the snow. That evening she tried the low road anyway, in the dark, in a rising storm, out of what I think was pure need to prove the valley couldn't hold her. 2 of the herd boys brought her back at midnight half frozen and furious. Her horse foundered to the knee, the storm having turned her around within a mile. I met them in the yard with a lantern, and I did not say I told you so. I put a dry cloak around her shoulders myself, and this time she was too cold and too beaten to refuse it, and when I settled it at her throat, she looked up at me with the snow melting on her lashes, and for one unguarded moment the ice was simply gone from her face, and there was only a tired girl, a long way from anyone who had ever been kind to her. The hush stood up under my ribs again, louder this time. "Why," she said, "are you being like this? I've come to take you home, you know that. Bran's told you what the writ can do. Why would you cloak me?" "Because you're cold," I said, "and I have a cloak." I have never in my life said anything I meant more plainly. She had no ledger answer for that. I watched her look for one and not find it, and she let me walk her in out of the storm, and the valley took her back the way it takes everything the snow brings, without asking whether it had earned the keeping. She served the writ the next morning, at the long table formally, because she was a woman who did things properly even when they cost her. She read it out in that flat, clear voice, and it was every bit as bad as Bran had feared. The debt my father took to buy grain in the famine year had been written with a lender's cunning, compounding on itself, penalties on penalties, so that a loan of one winter's bread had become, on paper, the worth of the whole valley. The granary, the mill, the freeholds, the grazing rights, all of it forfeit to the house of Sarn unless paid in full by the spring assizes, which no valley on earth could do. She read it to the end. She set it down, and she looked at me with the flat gray eyes and waited for what men did when they heard such a thing. I know what she was braced for. She'd carried 100 such writs, I'd wager, into 100 such halls, and she knew the shapes rage took. She was braced for me to roar, to threaten her, to seize the writ and burn it or seize her, and give her the excuse her whole trade was built on. See, they are brutes, they are debtors, they deserve the taking. She had come armored against a tyrant because tyrants were what her life had taught her to expect, and a tyrant would have made all of this so much easier for her. I poured her a cup of the hot spiced cider we drink at festival, and I set it by her hand. "That's a very clever piece of writing," I said. "Your master earns his fee. My father was a good man and a poor sum counter, and he'd have signed anything to see this valley eat that winter, and Sarn knew it and lent accordingly." I sat. "So, it's true then. On paper Emberfell is already yours. What do you mean to do with it?" She stared at me. "You're not—" She stopped. "You should be shouting." "Would it help?" "Men shout," she said, as if explaining weather to a child. "They shout, and then they beg, and then they threaten, and then I write down what they have and I ride to the next hall. That's how this goes. That's how it always goes." "Not here," I said. "Here we're going to drink cider, and you're going to tell me how a woman who does that—" I nodded toward the mill cottages where the Hallow Child was sitting up and taking bark tea, came to spend her life carrying writs like that one. I pushed the cider an inch closer, because I don't believe the two live in the same person by choice. I thought she would refuse me. She very nearly did. But there is a thing that happens to people who have been cold a long time when they are finally, stubbornly, unfrightenedly seen. A crack runs through the ice and something behind it gives. She told me in pieces over the cider, in the flat voice she used for numbers because it was the only voice she had left. Her father had been a smallholder who'd borrowed from the house of Sarn in a bad year. She saw the joke of it, the ugly circle, and her mouth twisted. And when he couldn't pay, the house had taken the holding and taken her too, a child of 11, in bond against the balance. She'd grown up in the counting houses of Sarn learning debts the way other children learned songs. She'd been good at it. She was clever and she was fair, and it turned out fairness made her a better collector than cruelty ever did, because people trusted her, and trust is the last thing a good creditor steals. The healing she'd learned earlier at her mother's knee, before the taking, and she'd folded it away because a debt factor with a soft heart is a debt factor who starves. "I've 11 years yet on my bond," she said, "if I collect what I'm set to collect, less if I collect it well." She looked at the writ on the table between us. Emberfell collected well would buy back near half my years. She said it without apology, laying her own cage plainly on the table beside mine, one prisoner showing another the bars. "So you see, my lord, that's why I came, not for Sarn, for the 11 years. I understood her then, entirely. She was not the wolf sent to eat my valley. She was a creature in a trap of her own, gnawing at my leg because it was the only way she knew to reach her own. "Drink your cider," I said gently. It's getting cold, and nothing about your 11 years or my valley is going to be solved tonight, so we may as well not let good cider die of it. And she, Neve of the Ledger, who had ridden in to price my home to the spoon, put her cold hands around the warm cup, and drank, and something in her shoulders came down an inch that I don't think had come down in years. I could not have kept her out of the festival if I'd chained her to the Ledger, and I didn't try. It's the kindling, our turning of the year festival. The night in Burfell fills every lamp and hearth and window lantern against the longest dark, so that from the past the whole valley glows like a bowl of banked coals. There's the long table and the spiced cider and old Marta's honey cakes, and the pipers, and the dancing in the great barn, and the whole valley in it together, high and low, because in Burfell on kindling night there is no high and low. There's only the light we make against the cold, and everyone carries a share of it. Neve came down to it in her plain dark factor's clothes, meaning, I'm sure, to stand at the edge and count. She got as far as the barn door. That was where the Hallow child found her. He was well enough now to be carried, and his mother had brought him to the warmth, and the moment he saw the woman who'd breathed his life back into him, he lunged out of Marta's arms for her with the total tyranny of the very small, and Neve, who did not know how to refuse a writ and knew even less how to refuse a 2-year-old, caught him against her chest by pure reflex, and then stood frozen, holding him, plainly with no idea what to do next. He grabbed a fistful of her hair and beamed at her. She looked, for the first time since she'd ridden in, completely undone. He likes you, Marta said comfortably, making no move at all to take him back. Sit, sit, you'll want cake. And that was how the valley took her, not all at once, but the way the snow takes the pass, quietly from every side, until the road you came in by is simply gone. Someone put a honey cake in her free hand. Someone filled her cider. The pipers started and the barn began to move, and when the dancing swept past, Bran, who 3 days before had wanted her left in the snow, bowed to her with the child still on her hip, and said the kindling dance was a poor thing danced short a hand, and would she stand up for it? And to my everlasting astonishment she handed the boy to his mother and did. She danced badly. She danced like a woman who had not danced since she was 11 years old and had forgotten she was allowed. She got the turns wrong and laughed at herself getting them wrong, laughed, out loud, a real laugh, startled out of her like a bird from cover. And the valley laughed with her, not at her, and the two are as different as the two kinds of cold, and I think she felt the difference land because she looked across the barn and found me watching, and for once she did not put the ice back up. The old wolf came to her, too. Every hold has its wolves, and mine has old gray, 3-legged, half-blind, past hunting, who tolerates the world at best and lets no stranger's hand near him. Gray crossed the whole barn to lie down across Neve's feet as if he'd chosen her out of every soul in Burfell and put his grizzled head on her boot and sighed and slept. She went very still, looking down at him. He shouldn't, she said. Animals know a taker. Animals know a healer, I said. You keep telling me what you are. He's telling you what you're not. Later the fires burned down, the pipers gone home, the barn near empty, the child asleep. The light of 100 lanterns still gilding the snow through the open door. I found her by the last fire with the sleeping wolf at her feet and the ledger satchel nowhere in sight, and I sat down beside her, and neither of us said anything for a long while. The hush was in me the whole time. It had stopped pretending to be the fire. I can't stay in this, she said at last, quietly watching the coals. You understand that. Every hour I sit by your fire and hold your children and dance in your barn, the harder it will be to do the thing I was sent to do. And I have to do it, Warwick. I have 11 years. I have nothing else. I can't afford, her voice caught, the first unlevel thing I'd heard from her. I can't afford to be warm. Do you see? Warm is a thing I can't afford. I see, I said. And I did. And I understood, sitting there with the snow hush ringing through me clear as a struck bell, that whatever I was to her, and whatever she was becoming to me, I could not do to her what everyone in her life had done. I could not be one more person who wanted something from her, who said a warm thing in front of her only to take a cold thing back. So I didn't reach for her hand, though I wanted to more than I have ever wanted anything. I let the fire pop between us. Then here's my promise, I said. I won't ask you to stay, not once, not the whole winter. You'll do your reckoning, you'll fill your ledger, you'll count in Burfell to the spoon, and I won't say a word to stop you. The snows shut the past, not me. When the thaw opens it, if you want to ride out and buy back your years with my valley's bones, I'll open the gate myself and stand aside. I looked at her. You've never once in your life been somewhere you were free to leave and stayed anyway because you wanted to. So I'm going to give you that, Neve. All winter, the door unlocked, and we'll see come spring what you do with an open door. She turned and looked at me then, and the firelight was on her face, and the ice was all the way gone, and what was under it was so unguarded and so unused to itself that it took my breath. That's a terrible bargain for you, she whispered. You'd let me take everything. No, I said. I'd let you choose. Those aren't the same, though I don't wonder you've never been shown the difference. Outside, very softly, it had begun to snow again, the kindling snow, the good, deep, quiet snow that seals a valley into itself for the season. There's the pass filling in behind you, I said, and there's a door I've just told you is open. Same night, same snow. One of them's a trap and one of them's a gift, and the only difference between them, Neve, is whether you're allowed to leave. She didn't answer. She looked out at the falling snow for a long time, with the old wolf's head heavy on her boot and 100 lanterns burning gold against the dark. And I saw her, for the first time in I'd have wagered a decade, not counting anything. The thaw she was afraid of came for her before the winter did, and it came the way winter troubles always come to Burfell, with the bell and the bad news, and no time to decide anything cleanly. It was 3 weeks after the kindling. She had in those weeks done exactly what she'd said she would. She'd reckoned my valley. She walked the granary and counted the sacks and wrote the tally in her clean small hand. She paced the mill and priced the wheel. She rode the freeholds with Bran, who now saved her the warm end of the bench without being asked, and set every hide and hoof and roof beam of Burfell into her ledger, patient and fair and terrible, building the sum that would buy back her years. She did it in front of me, and I said nothing, as I'd promised. The door stayed open. I never once mentioned it. That was the whole cruelty and the whole mercy of the thing, and we both lived inside it and neither of us named it. And every evening she sat by my fire with the old wolf on her feet and did not leave, and every morning the ledger was a little fuller, and neither of us said the word spring. Then the Marsh family didn't come down for the market day, and their nearest neighbor rode in white-faced to say their chimney smoke had stopped, and the fast bell rang. The Marsh holding is the highest in the valley, tucked under the shoulder of the pass where the snow comes deepest, an old couple and their daughter and the daughter's 2 small children, alone up there since the husband died. Snowsick likely, the chimney choked, the fire out, the cold coming in, and once the cold gets into a Snowden cottage it does its work in hours, not days. It's a full day up and back in fair weather, Bran said, at the gate, with the wind already rising and the sky the color of a bruise. And this isn't fair weather. This is the storm coming that the kindling snow was only the promise of. My lord, if we go up there and it closes on us. Then we'll be snowed in with the Marshes, and I'll owe 6 people my hospitality instead of 2, I said, pulling the girth tight. We go. Bran, you stay. The valley needs its steward if this storm is what the sky says. I'll take Call and Den and... You'll take me, said Neve. She was already mounted. She'd saddled her own horse while we argued, and she sat there in the rising wind with a healer's satchel, not the ledgers slung across her, having plundered old Marta's stores, and her face had the flat certain set I'd seen once before, over a choking child. 2 of those are small children who have been in a cold house a day, she said. If they're alive at all, they'll be past what a strong back can do for them. They'll need someone who knows the cold sickness, and none of your herd boys do, and you don't, and I do, so I'm going up. You can come with me, or you can waste more daylight telling me not to. She gathered her reins. You promised you wouldn't stop me leaving, my lord. I'm holding you to it. I'm leaving. I'm just leaving up. I have been obeyed all my life. I did not know until that moment how it would feel to be, instead, simply joined, to have someone ride up beside me into a killing storm, not because I commanded it, but because she had weighed the sum herself and come to the same terrible answer I had. I looked at her, and the snow hush stood up in me so hard I nearly could not breathe past it, and I understood at last, fully, what the hush had been telling me since the day she'd frozen my heart still with her half-frozen hand in the yard. Not that I wanted her, that I knew her. That whatever old power runs under this valley and picks, once in a lord's life, the one soul that fits the empty place in him, it had picked, and it had picked the wolf sent to eat my home, and it had known better than I did, because look at her, riding to her own likely death up a shut mountain for 2 children who weren't in her ledger and never would be. Ride close, was all I said. When it comes, it'll come white, you won't see me at arm's length. Ride so close you can touch me and don't stop touching me, or the snow'll have you in 10 steps. We rode up into it. And it came white, as I'd said, the storm closing over the world like a lid, the road gone, the sky and the ground the same screaming pale nothing, and we went up into the throat of it hand to hand and knee to knee, and there is no need to make a song of that ride. It was cold beyond cold and long beyond bearing, and there were 2 hours of it where I steered by nothing but the wind's angle and the memory of the land in my own feet, and where the only thing in the whole white world that was warm and real and mine was her gloved hand fisted in my cloak, refusing, in that howling blankness, to let go. We found the marshes by the smell of the dead fire. The old man was gone. He'd given his cloak and his warmth to the little ones and lain down in the cold the way the old will do, and I carried him out and we did him right later. The rest were alive, barely, and Neve went to work. I have seen brave things. I've led men in a border fight and seen courage of the loud kind, the kind with a sword in it. I had never seen anything like the cold, patient, ferocious mercy of that woman in that frozen cottage through that long night, packing the blue-lipped children against the daughter's body and her own, teaching us to warm them slow so the cold-shocked heart wouldn't stop, breathing her own breath into the smaller one when it faltered, coaxing the dead fire back to a coal, and the coal to a flame, and the flame to a life. She did not stop, and she did not falter, and she did not once count a single thing. By the gray dawn, when the storm blew itself out and the world came back, all 5 of the living marshes were living still, wrapped and warm and breathing, and Neve of the ledger sat against the mended hearth with a sleeping child inside each arm of her cloak and her head tipped back against the stone. So far past exhaustion, she'd come out the other side into a kind of stillness, and she looked at me across the small, warm room, and neither of us needed the ice anymore, and neither of us put it up. "You could have died on that road," I said. "So could you. I've a valley that needs me. You've 11 years and a ledger and no reason on this earth to ride up a shut mountain into a storm for 2 children who will never be worth a copper to the house of Sarn." I crossed the room and crouched in front of her and the sleeping children, and I did not touch her, because even then, even there, I would not be one more hand that took. "Why did you come, Neve? Truly. Not the reckoning reason, the real one." She looked down at the small dark head against her breastbone and up at me, and the answer that came out of her was not one she'd prepared. I'd stake my life on it, because it came out cracked and wondering, like she was hearing it for the first time herself. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of them cold," she said, "and no one making it warm." And then her face crumpled all at once, the whole frozen decade of it going at once, and she wept, not prettily, not quietly, but the deep, ugly grieving of a woman who has just found out, at the bottom of a storm, that the healer she'd buried at 11 was not dead after all, only waiting, and that being warm was not a thing she couldn't afford. It was the only thing she'd ever truly wanted and been forbidden. I gathered her in then, her and both the sleeping children and all of it, and held the 3 of them by the mended fire, and she cried herself out against my shoulder while the sun came up clean and gold over a world scrubbed white, and I said nothing at all, because some warmth you give by not putting a price on it. not even the price of a word. The envoy from the house of Sarn came 10 days later, on the first hard-frozen road, before the second storm, which tells you something about the house of Sarn, that they'd send a man up a killing mountain in the dead of winter, rather than let a debt sit an idle month. His name doesn't matter. He was one of those men the great counting houses breed, soft-handed and hard-eyed, in a good fur that had never seen a real cold, and he came into my hall as if he already owned the beams of it, which, on paper, he did. He'd come, he said, because the house had had no word from its factor since the first snow, and the house did not care for silence. He'd come to see the reckoning done and the writ enforced. And he'd come, he let this land last, watching Neve's face while he said it, because there'd been a concern at Sarn that a factor snowed in a long winter with a charming debtor might grow soft, and the house had thought it wise to send a man who would not. "Show me the tally," he said to Neve, holding out his soft hand. "And then we'll speak about the manner of the collection, and about your bond, factor, and the 11 years of it, and whether a winter's softness has added to them or taken away." I watched her go white, and then very still, and I understood the shape of the trap she'd been in all along was worse even than she'd shown me. It was not only that collecting in Burfell would buy back her years. It was that failing to collect it, going soft, as the house put it, would add to them. She had ridden into my valley with her freedom staked on my ruin, yes, but also with her freedom staked against her own heart, the house having wagered, coldly and correctly, that a life of buried mercy would eventually cost the mercy or the life, and either way Sarn won. She reached for the leather satchel. "There's no need to trouble the factor," I said. "I have the tally. She did it well, you'll find nothing missing from it and nothing softened. Every spoon of Imberfell is in that book, correct to the copper. Your house will have no complaint of her work." I came down the hall. "Your complaint, if you have one, is with me, because the writ won't be paid." The envoy smiled the smile of a man who has heard this in 100 halls. "The writ is the writ, my lord. Spring assizes. Pay in full or forfeit the valley. There's no third road." "There is," I said, "and you rode in on it. You said the house had had no word from its factor since the first snow. You said it didn't care for silence. Well, here's a word for the house, and you'll carry it back down the mountain for me." I set my hands on the table where my father had signed away his valley to feed it, and I looked the house of Sarn in its soft envoy's eyes. "My father borrowed a winter's bread, and your house rode it into the worth of a whole valley and 11 years of a stolen child. That's not a debt. That's a theft with a quill for a knife. And I'll tell you what Imberfell will pay, and not a coin more. We'll pay back the grain. The actual grain, what was actually lent, weight for weight, good wheat this spring and a fair interest on it, the kind an honest lender takes. That's the true debt, and Imberfell has always paid its true debts. The rest of it, the compounding, the penalties, the whole clever cruelty your house built on my father's love for his people, that we will not pay, and you may take that to your spring assizes, and I'll stand up in front of any honest judge between here and the sea and read out how the sum was made, and we'll see which of us the law is ashamed of." The envoy's smile had gone. "You'd fight the house of Sarn." "I'd fight anyone," I said, "who tried to buy my valley with a lie and a girl's stolen years, but I'd rather not fight at all. I'd rather your house take the fair grain and the fair interest, close the book, cancel the bond, and go back to lending honestly, which I'm told is still possible and even profitable." I straightened. "Those are the terms. The true debt paid gladly, the false debt refused entirely. And the factor's bond bought out with it, because that's part of the true reckoning too, and I'll pay her price along with the grain gladly to the last of it." "No." It was Neve. She'd come to her feet. "No," she said again, and she was not looking at the envoy, she was looking at me. "You'll not pay my price, Warwick, not you. Everyone I have ever known has bought and sold me, my father borrowed against me. The house bonded me, and I'll be in the ground before I let the one man who never once tried to buy me now, even kindly, even to free me. I won't have it. Do you hear? I will not be a thing you purchased, not even a thing you purchased and set free. I'd rather serve out, every one of the 11 years. And there it was, the whole of her, out at last, fierce and unfrozen and free, defending her own unbought soul against the only person who'd ever offered to pay her price for her rather than to her. And God help me, I had never loved anything the way I loved her in that moment, standing in my hall refusing to be rescued, because being rescued was one more way of not being chosen. "Then I won't," I said. "You're right, and I won't, not a copper toward your bond." I turned back to the envoy. "The grain and the fair interest, that's in Burfell's whole offer. The factor's bond is the factor's own, and she'll settle it herself in her own way on her own terms, owing me nothing." I let that stand a moment. "But know this before you ride. Whatever she decides about her years, she does it as a free woman under my roof from this hour, not as your house's hand. She's served your writ. It's done. She's off your errand and out of your counting house, and if the House of Sarn sends another man up my mountain to collect her, he'll find the whole valley between him and her, and the pass has a way of staying shut for men it doesn't care for." The envoy rode out the next dawn, with the offer and no factor. I gave Neve the ledger back, her own ledger, the tool of her whole servitude, and I told her it was hers now, not the house's, to burn or keep as she saw fit, and that she owed me nothing, and that the door was still open. The pass was frozen hard by then. A strong rider could have made it out careful in the cold, clear stretch before the next storm. I made sure she knew that. I would not have her stay because she couldn't leave. I had promised her a winter of an open door, and I meant her to have every last day of it. "You could ride out day after tomorrow," I said. "Down to the low country, out from under Sarn, start again somewhere they've never heard of a ledger. I'd send you with grain and coin and brand to see you safe to the crossroads. You don't know one anything, not the house, not me. You'd be free and gone and warm somewhere by the true spring." I made myself say the rest. "It's a real road, Neve. I'm not saying it to be told no. If freedom means the open pass, then take the open pass. I'll open it with my own hands and be glad. I could give you the one thing no one ever did." She was quiet a long moment, standing in the yard where she'd frozen my heart still on the first day, with old Gray leaning his grizzled weight against her leg, and the whole valley glowing behind her in the short gold afternoon. "That's the trouble with you, Warwick," she said at last, and there was something in her voice I'd not heard before, light, almost the laugh from the barn. "You keep offering me the open door. Everyone else in my whole life spent their strength keeping doors shut on me, and you won't stop propping this one open, no matter how cold the wind that comes through it." She shook her head slowly. "Do you know what a shut door does to a person like me? It makes leaving the only thing worth wanting. All my life the only freedom I could imagine was the door that wouldn't open, so of course I ran at everyone, because the running was all the wanting I was allowed." She looked up at me. "And then you gave me an open one, and I've stood in front of it 3 weeks now, and I find," her voice went unlevel again, the way it had over the sleeping child, "I find I don't want to go through it. I never wanted the door, Warwick. I wanted to be somewhere I didn't have to." "You're free to go," I said, very low, because I had to say it one last time or the gift wasn't clean. "I'll open the pass tomorrow." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm staying." And she stepped across the last of the cold between us and put her frozen hands up against my chest, over the place where the hush lived, and I swear to you it went quiet under her palms the way the valley goes quiet before the good snow. The whole waiting hush of Imberfell answered at last, standing still and full and home. And she felt it. I saw her feel it, her breath caught, and she said, wondering, "Oh, there it is. I've been hearing it all winter and thinking it was the snow." And I put my arms around her at last, in the gold cold afternoon, with the door standing open behind her and the whole valley witness, and she stayed. She stayed because she chose to. There is no other way I would have had her, and no other way she could have come. I kissed her once at the temple and drew her in out of the cold, and that was all, and it was everything. And it fades from the telling here the way the light faded gold over the snow, into the warm and private, and enough. We paid the House of Sarn its true debt that spring, the honest grain, weight for weight and a fair interest, and not one coin of the false sum. They took it. Cruel houses are also careful houses, And mine was not the only lord who'd have stood up at the assizes to read out how their books were made, and the House of Sarn found, on reflection, that it preferred a quiet fair payment to a loud honest reckoning. The writ was closed. The valley was never theirs. And Neve's bond, she settled that herself, in the end, the way she'd sworn she would, owing me nothing. She wrote to the house and offered them, in place of the 11 years, the one thing they valued more than a bonded factor, which was to be left in peace by a lord who knew how their sums were built. They let her go for it. She bought her own freedom with the only coin she'd ever truly owned, which was herself, and she spent it on herself, and I have never been prouder of anything I had no hand in. She keeps the valley's ledger now. That's the thing I think of when I think of how it all turned, that the book the House of Sarn made to enslave her, the clever, cruel instrument of debts compounding in the dark, sits open on a table in my hall in her clean, small hand, and every figure in it now is honest. She lends Imberfell's surplus to the holdings that fall short in a bad year the way her father was lent to. Once, the true way, the grain-for-grain way, a winter's bread written down as a winter's bread and never a copper more, and she keeps the count fair, and no smallholder in this valley will ever borrow a loaf and owe a life. She took the thing that broke her and turned it and made it kind. I did not ask her to. She is not a woman who does the thing she's asked. She is a woman who rides up the mountain because she cannot stand the thought of anyone cold, and no one making it warm. The pass opened, that first spring, the way it always does. I walked up to it with her when the road came clear, because I'd promised her an open door and I wanted her to see it truly open. No snow, no trap, nothing holding her but what she chose. We stood at the top where the world falls away toward the low country and the whole road out lay bare and easy in the thawlight. The road she'd ridden in on to take everything, standing open now to carry her away with everything, free and clear if she wanted it. She looked down the open pass a long while. Then she took my hand and turned her back on the road, and we walked down into the warm valley together, and she never once looked over her shoulder at the door she was free to take and didn't. That's the whole of it. She rode in to collect a debt and leave me by dawn. The valley never let her go, but the valley never had to in the end. She stayed the only way that was ever any good, with the pass wide open behind her and her hand in mine, walking down.